Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to another True Crime Time with Junebug. That's me. And I know it's been a while. And you're probably wondering, well, probably not, but wondering where the shorts were. Well, I had a complete nervous breakdown, and I'm still recovering, so that did not take top priority. Anyway, this is my first time recording since the incident, so let's see how it goes. See, the name of the channel just works so well. Anyway, today I don't even know how I stumbled upon this case. I don't know, but here we are. So today I normally talk about like the victims, but we're just gonna talk about like the asshole slash criminal today because there's just more info on them. And by more info, there's not a ton. So today we are talking about Polly Bartlett and her dad, or aka the murderess of Slaughterhouse Gulch. What a title. Now, this takes place in the mid 1800s. And I always say the ages of the victims in case anything with children bothers you. I'm 99% sure there was no children. They were all grown men. I believe they were all men. Now, this takes place in the Wyoming Territory because, as you probably guessed from the mid 1800s, Wyoming wasn't a state yet, so it's just the Wyoming Territory. I did see one source say this took place in Vermont. I'm pretty sure it's Wyoming based off of all the other sources I saw. But in the off chance, I do want to throw it out there that one place said Vermont. Very different parts of the US. Now, the status of this case is it's solved? Maybe? We'll get into it. I do want to note before I dive into everything that there's not much known and it's a pretty cut and dry case. And I'll explain that at the end. It will all make sense in due time. So this story starts with the Bartlett family. Had the father, like Mr. Bartlett, according to sources, his name is either Stephen, John, or Jim. But I will be calling her father Jim. One, because it's the shortest, and two, because that's the name I saw first. So, Jim. There was also his son. Don't know his name. Another Bartlett. They had a relative named Hattie with them. Don't know if she was cousin, niece, aunt, I don't know. It just said there was a relative named Hattie with them. And then there was the daughter, Polly, which I mentioned at the beginning. I don't know their ages. I think they're all grown. I'm 90% sure they're all grown, but it doesn't specify. Now, the start of the story begins with them moving from Cincinnati after a failed bar business. Apparently, they tried settling in Colorado first. It didn't work. I don't know why. It just didn't. So they settled in South Pass City, which is in Wyoming Territory. Now, South Pass City was said to be a good stop along the Oregon Trail. Maybe you've seen it in one of the games. And it was also a good place for gold rushers, because that's going on right now too. It was just a very busy travel through place. And due to this, they figured this might be a good way to make some money. They set up a inn / lodge for people to stay at, which not a bad idea, honestly. But now the rumor has it they got this money to build this inn, because remember they had the failed bar business. Where'd they get this money to build an inn and start an inn? Well, let me tell you, rumor has it that they got the money from the saloon back when they had it, but not because it was so successful. No. Polly, the daughter, she would lure men in for the sex. She would get them alone, and then Jim, her dad, would rob the men once it was just the dude and Polly alone. So they weren't bringing in the big bucks from the saloon itself, it sounded like, but from robbing the patrons. Now, Polly's first victim, which I don't know if that means they killed him or if it just ended up really lucky that they made it big with this first victim. His name was Lewis Nichols, and he would leave them they took it, but they would get $4,000 from him, which I would love that amount now. But back then, I can't even imagine. In today's terms, that's about $80,000. A lot. Don't know why he had all that on him. Apparently he did. So once they got this money, and people might get suspicious, they left Ohio and then, as we know, built the lodge in South Pass City. Now, it seems that they just started this lodge to, yes, make money, but they wanted to make money by robbing people again. I don't know if that was the main goal, but if the rumors are true, it seems like, yes, they set up this business solely to rob people. Now, due to the times, mid-1800s, many of the guests I put quotes around single men, because they may have had wives or something like back home, but they were by themselves. I'm sure many of them were single, but just to throw that out there, that maybe they had families back home, but I don't know. And Polly would, when these single men would stay at the lodge, passing through the trail or trying to get some gold, Polly would, quote, liquor them up with a little whiskey and a little frisky, end quote. Which I kind of like that sentence. But after she did that, the whiskey and the frisky, she would serve them their meal, which was laced with arsenic. So the men would die, because you're not supposed to have arsenic, and Polly would steal their money, as we all could have guessed, and her dad, Jim, would bury them on the property. So that was their business plan. Instead of just, getting paid, instead of just being happy with the money they were already getting paid from the patrons, they needed to kill them and steal more money, I guess. Now, in nearly a year's time, I don't even know if it's a full year at this point, they killed 22 men. I assume they didn't kill every man that stayed. Well, I know for certain they didn't kill one, but we'll get to that. But I assume they had to let some men go so more people would stay at their lodge. But 22 men were seeming to be confirmed to have been killed by them in that first year. And I bet you're wondering, how come no one noticed? Well, I was wondering the same thing. But if someone did ask, because some people occasionally did get suspicious, they would just say, Polly and Jim, that Native Americans or quote-unquote outlaws got the men. And most of the time, I want to say majority of the time, they were believed, because this stuff did happen. A ton of people went missing around this time. I saw one article said that not many people missed the missing at this time because it was just so common. Native Americans did capture people at this time, and people would kill for money or for your horse. They would just, anything to help them survive. If you had it and you were alone, most likely they were going to try to take it from you. So it wasn't that crazy to say these men were just taken or killed by someone else. Now, they kept getting away with this, obviously, because they did this at least 22 times, until they robbed and killed a man named Theodore Fountain, or Barney Fountain. I saw both. I'm going to call him Theodore because that's what I saw first. Now, you're probably wondering, who's Theodore Fountain or Barney Fountain? Neither name rings a bell. Well, he was the son of Bernard Fountain. Now, if you're like me, you're like, who's Bernard Fountain? Well, I'll tell you. He was a rich mine owner in the area, which, this is the gold rush time. He was very popular, lots of money. He was a very powerful figure at this time, at least in this area. So since he was rich, he could and would hire a PI to help find his son. Now, the PI and the local sheriff, I assume it was literally just one guy, but they did their thing. and came to realize it was the Bartletts. I don't know how they came to the conclusion necessarily, or like I didn't see like any investigation like information, investigation information. I just assumed they put it together that a lot of men happen to be going missing from this inn. They can't have all been taken by Native Americans or killed by like the same outlaw or cowboy. That's why I assume they put two and two together, but I don't quite know how they realized it was the Bartletts, but they did. And by the time they went to like go arrest them, Polly and her dad had begun their flight to Oregon. They skedaddled. I also want to note, the investigators did go through the property and find all the buried bodies. I don't know if that was like before they tried to arrest them or after, or if it was a bit of both. Like, I don't quite know the timeline. It's very sketchy because, again, this is like 1860s. So the records aren't pristine, to say the least. I also don't know like what the other two family members are doing, like the son and that relative named Hattie. I don't know if they left. I don't know what they're doing. They're literally never mentioned again from what I saw. Just to let you know, I don't know what happened to them. But once they fled, the police, well, the sheriff, put up a $13,000 reward for anyone to get them. I think it was a dead or alive situation. They didn't care, just get them. Again, $13,000 is a lot today. Like, some rewards today for information is $10,000. So I saw very different numbers when I tried to do like an inflation calculator. But that money today is anywhere from $250,000 to $500,000. That's a freaking ton. Now, there was a man who would be able to claim that money. His name was Ed Ford. He would actually collect that money like a few days after that poster went up, that little, you know, those outlaw signs. I assumed it looked exactly like they do in the movies. Because he started to trail them, like, while they're trying to get to Oregon, and he found them camping along the Hoback River. Now, when they tried to run, he shot and killed Jim, and then dragged Polly back for her quote-unquote trial, but mainly it just said her hanging. Like, they just gonna get rid of her. So, good job, Ed. Now, turns out Ed, this is a bit personal to him, because he was almost a victim of theirs months back when he stayed at their lodge. The only reason he wasn't was because he doesn't really drink, so the whisking him up didn't work. And I don't think he was that interested in Polly, so the whiskey and the frisky, it didn't work on Ed. So he got away. Also, it got more personal when Ed's brother stayed at the lodge and was never seen again. And unfortunately, we can all gather that he most likely ended up buried on their property as well. So this is very personal for Ed, and I'm honestly very glad he was the one who found them. Now, once he like dragged Polly back and dumped her off at the sheriff's, she was put in jail. She would actually never go to trial. Now, I did mention earlier that I was just kind of like assumed she would just be hung right away, because it was pretty obvious it was her and her dad, because someone, or we know a man named Otto Kalkhorst, would shoot her through her jail cell window until she died. So, I mean, either way, it seems like she was gonna die, but he just decided to skip the whole process. Just do it now. Make it quick. This guy, because if you're wondering, like, what's this guy's problem? I don't think he was like a potential victim, but he did work in one of Fountain's mines. Remember the rich guy who owned the mines whose son was killed by Polly and her dad? This guy was one of the workers for him. So it seems kind of weird. I mean, they are connected, but that he would have such... Maybe he wanted a raise. I don't know. But it seems weird to have a vendetta against, like, your boss's son's killer. I mean, obviously you're not going to be like pleased, but it just seems like a weird, like I would never do that for my boss. No, I'm not going to do that. But the times were obviously different. And the kicker here, he was never charged with it. They know who did it, and they didn't care. They said it saves them time, essentially. They're like, well, that saves some time. And Polly was dead. So let's get into the little bit of aftermath. Again, I don't know what happened with those two other family members. We know Jim and Polly died. Jim was shot by Ed. Polly was shot by Otto in her jail cell. Don't know what happened to the brother or Hattie. Sorry. Also, don't really know what happened to the inn. Like if it was just abandoned after that, if someone else tried to move in, I don't really know. Today it's abandoned, but there is an article I saw, a very prominent article by Dean W. Ballinger, that was published in 1963, so nearly 100 years later, about the murders. This is one of the earliest and most detailed accounts of the murders, which seems really late, but I don't know. But also South Pass City, where this took place, why I mentioned the inn is abandoned today. South Pass City is actually considered a ghost town nowadays. I don't think anyone's lived there decades. It's completely abandoned. So no one's using that inn now, if that makes anyone feel better. Also, the true and final kicker I want everyone to know, and why I said the case is solved, maybe. Because you're probably thinking, Junebug, this seems pretty dang solved. Well, turns out this story may not even be true. There is no evidence to suggest it is, but there's also no evidence to really suggest it isn't, from what I saw. Some people consider it a folktale. I kind of lean more towards it happened. Maybe it wasn't as extreme as 22 men dying. But there are some pictures. Again, I don't necessarily know if the pictures are like legit, but like there's pictures of the inn and of Polly. But you could take any old photo and say it's someone. But I'm tending to believe it's kind of true. Because this would be a very specific and weird thing to like make up, in my opinion. And it just seems like there's just enough information for a case from the 1860s. Like if it was too much information, I would get suspicious because again, this is a very long time ago. But just, I don't really know what to think. I, again, am leaning towards it might be true. But just maybe it was a bit exaggerated through time. What do you think? Have you heard of this before? I had not. But if it is true, that would mean Polly is considered the first serial killer in Wyoming, because it's technically Wyoming territory, not Wyoming yet. And she would actually be the worst serial killer Wyoming's ever seen. Still. Which I guess is good that there's no one else killing over 20 people in Wyoming, but dang girl, that's, you be sucking, to put it lightly. But that is it for today. I hoped you found it interesting. Let me know what you think. Do you think it's legit? Not legit? Like me, somewhere in between? I'm actually very curious to hear what people think, so please let me know. And I'll see you next time for, I don't know what. I don't even remember what I have lined up. I like save things that I find interesting and go in order, but I don't remember what's next on the list. But bye guys.